Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blood and Pigment podcast. My name is Garrett Swader, and this is episode 6. Today, we're going to talk about Summer of Plunder a little bit and give an overview of what that's going to be about this year. And we're also going to do a hobby topic, fun little change of pace, building a ship and all that entails. So, we're going to give a little advice for doing all the steps for that. But we're going to go down the roll call. I am joined with Dan
Stop.
and Fernando.
Hello, everybody.
So, what's been going on in your world, Dan?
So I'm currently painting minis for an upcoming expansion. I've talked about it a lot, but it's for the naval portion of the Great Northern Wars. There'll be some fun new factions in there. The Danish and Swedish militia forces from No Peace will be updated with their own unique units, which I'm painting minis for as well. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And then I read a really good book called The Republic of Pirates. If you like pirates or want to learn more about kind of the 18th century setting of Blood and Plunder, I would highly recommend it. It's a very narrative-driven kind of storytelling, which I prefer, and it's a really, really easy read. So if you're not like a book guy or gal, it's really easy to pick up and read. I highly, highly, highly recommend it.
I have listened to that one on an audiobook before, yeah, and it's good. It's good. Yeah, like you said, it goes through a more storytelling piece by piece about all of these characters and goes through everything that they did that we know of.
And I'm at a point where it's really rare for me to learn something new when reading pirate books like this because I've done and read and watched so much. But I didn't know that in the Queen Anne's Revenge, Blackbeard raided the town of Guadalupe, I think, and he just rolled up, fired some cannons, and dropped off some men, and they went and took a fort. It's awesome. I'm looking at possibly making that into a scenario, but it's awesome. Love it. Highly, highly recommend it. You can get it on Amazon, or I use like thrift books. I like to buy used books when possible. They got a little more character. But yeah, and then I also have coming from Benderson Little a copy of Sea Rover's Practice and Pirate Hunters. I'm very excited to read.
Sea Rover's Practice is almost like the Blood and Plunder Bible.
Yeah, and he was kind enough to send me a signed copy because I asked so nicely. So really, really thrilled about that.
Nice. Fernando, do you have anything going on in your world?
Well, I'm sorry to say and disappoint the pirate community here, but I have not done anything related to pirates.
Well, that's good. That's good. I mean, pirates are icky, so
Yeah, there are pirates in several areas. So what I have done is I painted some Mexicans, so this is related a little bit with Blood and Steel. So those are some bandits that I bought at Salute at London, and they were nice to paint.
cool.
And I haven't read anything related to anything like that, so nothing to share on that regard.
A question on that, Fernando. Is that for the Texas Revolution module you've been doing for Steel?
So I mean, I don't know anything. So I did the lists and I have I would say the module, but I haven't talked with anybody about publishing it or doing things like that.
All right, okay. That's still awesome. I like to see other players take initiative and write PDFs. I have like 4 going.
Anyone that wants to have access to my list, I can share it. Just email me, and I will do that.
What have you been up to, Garrett?
I am still working on my galleon. It's topical today because I'm still working on the hull. I've not gotten to the rigging yet. I'm still just painting everything. But that's almost finished. I actually went by the game store today, my game store that I frequent, and talked to some guys that were all there putting together Blood and Plunder models for Summer of Plunder coming up, which is also topical. But that was fun. Quick little lunch, and then walked over there for an hour, talked to them for a while. And then I've been working on, speaking of Blood and Steel, I've been working on another Blood End game now that they've got me sucked into Blood and Valor.
Hell yeah.
I'm doing a Lawrence of Arabia force for Blood and Valor, an Arab revolt force. So I've got them sitting over here kind of painted.
Is that a special faction, like British or in Arabia, or like Arabs?
It's kind of a hybrid of British and Arab. Like you can take a mix, you can take all British, you can take all Arab. What I'm planning on doing right now is just doing mostly Arabs and then like a British armored car because that was really relevant back in that time. The armored cars were not very effective on the Western Front because of all the trenches and stuff. You had to go out on the periphery to some of the other theaters for armored cars to really shine back then. And one of the places that they really did well was the Middle East.
Interesting. And where did you get your minis?
So the minis, I think, are from Artisan Designs, if I remember correctly, but I got them from Brigade Games, I believe. And then the armored car is actually on Thingiverse. I just went on there and looked for a Rolls-Royce armored car, and one came up that was it looked really nice. And it's an FDM kit. It's like you print it out, and it's a section to where you have to put it together after it prints, so it's not all one piece. But that's almost better in an FDM print, so that everything kind of stays level and flat. So yeah, it turned out really well.
Sounds pretty nice.
Yep. But enough about all that. We've got a big campaign coming up in a couple of weeks. Dan, do you want to go through some of the rule changes and how things are going to be different this year? I know the one thing that's not going to be different is Dan and I are still going to be commanders.
Yeah, so I believe most of the commanders are the same. I think we may have a new native commander.
New native and new Dutch commander, I believe.
Awesome. All right, so as everybody knows, if you played last year was more about the number of games played. We have heard that feedback. We are no longer doing that system. So we're just kind of going to break down kind of what changed, but very, very briefly. If you want to see the long, in-depth view of it, head over to the Blood and Pigment website. There'll be a tab for the Summer of Plunder 2024 HQ. That will give you all the rules in all their deepest and most detailed forms. I'm just going to hit on the main points here. So number of games does not matter. You can go out and you can spam 50-point games all you want. That does not give you an edge over anybody else, because what's going to happen is as everybody plays games, you're just going to log a game. You're going to vote onto where you would like your point to be spent for, be it attack or defense. And then at the end of the week, us commanders will take a look at our little spreadsheet, and based on where your votes is where we kind of have to attack. And all we get to do is throw a point, on an offense or a defense, however we so choose. So it may look really complicated. It's really not. The best way to wisely vote is to get involved on the Discord server for Summer of Plunder. Get in, join with the nation, and that will be the best place to go and get that done. So the nations will have a fixed amount of points each round, so everybody has the same amount of points to spend each round, and the players will decide where the bulk of those points are allocated. And this year we have outlawed spying. Last year it kind of got out of hand, so there is no spying this year. Games are meant to be fair, and this is less about winning, losing, doing gaming. It's more about giving away prizes and building communities over a game that we love so much.
But as in every year, the pride that you feel for your nation winning Summer of Plunder is amazing. So it's going to be hotly contested,
especially if we beat Spain.
It's going to be first two-time champion, Spain.
I don't know. The natives did really well in the play test. It might be their year.
That's the good thing about this format is it doesn't matter how many players you actually have. Like as long as you have 4 people playing, you're good.
Yeah.
Like you can beat anybody as long as you just have like 3 or 4 people playing.
Okay, let's rewind a little bit and just assume that I'm a new player. I've never played Blood Plunder, and I'm just getting into it. And they tell me that there is this thing called Summer of Plunder. How would you sell this thing to a new player? What is Summer of Plunder?
So Summer of Plunder is basically we call it a global campaign that gets people all over the world playing Blood and Plunder. If you haven't played it, it's our 28mm skirmish game. And essentially what happens is you get to play games that basically log into a board game, essentially, an area control board game.
And how do I contribute to? What do I need to do?
So all you need to do is play games of Blood and Plunder, get yourself some minis, play, and then once you play that game, you'll take a picture of your game, go onto the Blood and Pigment website, and there'll be a whole form to fill out. It takes maybe a minute or two. Well, you will submit pictures, submit what faction you played, what nationality you played, and then where essentially you would like to attack or defend.
Okay, you were previously talking about prizes. So if I'm a player, can I win something just by playing games?
Yes. So we give out a stupid amount of prizes every year from the nations themselves. Each commander has a bunch of prizes that are worth $100 each based on what they spent. But $100 worth of prizes they're going to give out essentially, if not weekly, bi-weekly, and then there's a bunch of prizes for the actual campaign, with the grand prize for the nation that actually wins. Grand prize being a 6-rate frigate, and that is chosen randomly from the winning nation.
Right.
That sounds amazing.
And to note, in previous years, commanders have been responsible for challenges each week. This year, only week 3 and week 9 will be commander-specific challenges. So you will only have Spanish challenges on week 3 and week 9 if you're playing as a Spanish player.
So how many weeks does Summer and Plunder last, and when does it start?
The starting date is June 2nd, and it will run for 9 weeks, all the way till August. I think the last weekend for it is actually Gen Con weekend. So if you're with me at Gen Con, we can play some Blood and Plunder to finish out the Summer of Plunder season.
Sounds good. And what do I need to do to log in games? Do I need to take pictures of the games?
Yes, a picture of your game. If you forget, a picture or screenshot of your list.
Preferably a picture of the game.
Yeah, we prefer a picture of the game.
Yeah, I can't think of much else that's going to change this year. I know a big change for me is that I'm going to have an actual game store that I'm going to play games with a group. In previous Summer of Plunder seasons, I've just been playing at home mostly.
Are all your players doing Spanish?
Oh no. They're all either pirates or English. You silly popular factions.
My store committed to playing nothing but pirates, so
Yeah, I know. A lot of your guys just stabbed me in the back. Like everybody in your store was Spanish last year, and now and then I
you're
was like,
poorly equipped
"Hey,
back.
hey, here's the Discord for anybody that wants to continue being Spanish." And then like none of them wanted to be. I was like, "All right, guys, okay. I guess we don't want to go for 2 in a row." But I would be sad if we missed saying this as well. There's also going to be an organized play kit this year. So if you haven't already, if you don't know about this, get with your store and go find this on the Firelock website. You can order a organized play kit, and I believe that just went up for pre-order today as we're recording this. It will be a set of miniatures for 4 people, a set of alternate art sailor cards that Joseph has taken pictures of these different sailor units in poses that look very nice and look very good on a card. And I think there are some other goodies in there, such as fortune coins and stuff like that. But it's all in a kit, and it comes with scenarios and some posters and things to help promote the campaign. You can buy that for $50, and you can buy an additional 4-player package that just contains the miniatures and the goodies for an additional $40. So if you need extra miniatures to support your play group, you can order those extra miniatures that way. Okay, I think we've run that into the ground, possibly. I heard somebody entering. Joseph is back.
You gotta crash the party.
We just got finished talking about Summer of Plunder. And back.
He's back from his pile of books.
So yeah, we're just going to transition to building a Blood and Plunder ship. So if you want to jump right into that, Joseph, go right ahead.
Oh, don't make me lead the way. It's all yours. I'll just throw it from the corner over here.
So when I start one of these projects for the resin hull specifically, most of the time I will have some kind of little imperfection in the hull that I will want to fix. I don't. It may just be my bad luck with these hulls, but most of the time I have like a little bubble somewhere that I'm like, I want to fix that, put some putty in there, sand it a little bit, and get it nice and flush. But nothing really egregious. I think I've had to send one ship back to where I was like, I really think this should not be as bad as it is. So I had to call or email customer service about it. But other than that, they've been fantastic.
Yeah, they're big models, and the way they pour the resin, you get bubbles in there occasionally. And if the mold is wearing out, sometimes you'll get little extra crap you got to scrape off. But yeah, on some ships like the Galleon, like you mentioned, Fernando, with multiple parts you got to fit together. That was a lot of work, but most of them 5-10 minutes, unless there's lots of cannon ports to cut open. Those are a pain.
Yeah, and it depends on how thick the cannon port little piece is too, because sometimes it's like really thick, and you have to get in there with a saw almost to cut it
You
out.
want a sharp hobby knife for sure.
And please, when you're sanding these resin hulls, wear a dust mask or some kind of keep. Do not breathe the particles from these resin hulls. It is not good for you.
When you prime, right?
And you got to glue in the wooden chain guards as well. Do not forget that. When you're prepping the hull, super glue those little bastards in.
So I actually do that after I prime. I don't know if other people do that or not, but I leave them wooden and I don't paint them.
I always paint mine, so I like to put them in first because that priming over the top of them kind of helps glue it together so it doesn't come apart. And if you have to scrape out those holes a little bit with your knife to make them fit perfectly, it can mess up your paint and priming as well. So I always glue them in very first, right after cleaning up the hole, then spray over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I do, I do fit them in before I prime. So I try to scrape and make them fit right before I prime, but then I prime and then I put those in and glue them. But that's just my process.
Yeah, I do the same. I actually prime and paint the hull and do the other stuff separately. So I only kind of glue them after the hull is painted, actually.
I think I might have done that on a couple of mine just because I forgot to put them in until the very end. Like I go to rig and I'm like, oh, wait, I need something to rig with. I need to put something on to put my rigging through.
Another thing that people do differently is the gun port hatches. When do you glue those on? Especially on a bigger ship, there can be a bunch of them, and they can get knocked off if you aren't careful while you're working with it. When do you guys glue those on?
Personally, I have always done those pre-prime. I glue them on before I prime, and I've never really had an issue with it. I've never had one get knocked off, so knock on wood, that's what I do, and it's worked out for me.
Priming probably helps glue them in place too.
Really depends for me. If their gun ports are going to be closed, I glue those on immediately. If they're going to be open, I don't like to have them open like all the way up. I prefer to have them resting on the cannon because I think it looks a little cooler. And I tend to glue my cannons on as well for just because cannons can be fiddly. But otherwise, if you're going to glue them straight up, I don't see an issue with gluing them on, right away. But if they're going to be resting on the cannon barrels, I wait to put those.
Did you say you glue your cannons to the deck?
It depends on the ship. So, like my Corvette for Adepticon, I knew I was going to run medium guns, so I glued them on the deck, so I didn't have to worry about the paint shipping off or anything in transit
You
via
monster.
train. If it's not something I'm going to travel with, then I leave the cannons off. But like my Bark Long, my Barcaloengo, I glued those medium guns on the front because I know that's all I'm going to be running up there.
You monster.
It makes it easy. And I have the little postcards. If I lose a gun, I just exit out.
Yeah. It works.
So I glue them last, just as with the other things. I think all my gun ports are semi-open. They are not resting on a cannon, so I do not glue the cannons, but they are semi-open. So I guess I prime them at a later stage of my painting process, and I do them apart. And then when they're done and primed and painted and varnished, then I glue them.
Do you think that helps with stability, or is that just the way you thought to do it first, and that's just the way you do it?
Given that the gun ports are not are semi-open again, they are basically making a perpendicular. They are perpendicular to the walls of the hull, so they are. I cannot see myself handling the painting of the hull with them glue them on.
You're afraid you'll knock them off while you're painting.
So,
and with them being like that, that might be more of a concern. Yeah, mine, when I do them, they're all the way up. I just have them as flat as they can be against the hull. I have no idea what's more accurate, but that's just the way I did it.
I think the 90 degrees is more accurate, but it's so fragile and so hard to get them to glue that way, and so easy to bust them off if you're taking your ship back and forth to the game store. I've mostly done them 180 degrees straight up to. You have so much more surface area for the glue to work with.
I'd also like to clarify, I do paint the cannons first and glue them on when the ship is done. I don't just glue them on before I prime. I like to get the deck painted.
Okay, so you're not that much of a monster.
No, I still like to get the deck painted and everything. Then the cannons go on last with all the other little accessories and accoutrements.
Another, so weird question. I think I do mine correctly. Are you supposed to have the wood finish out or the metal pieces out when you're doing your gun ports?
Plain wood should be out when they're open because the plain wood goes inside, and then the hinges are on the exterior of the hull, so they'll be. Yeah.
Well, when they're closed, the hinges will be on the outside when they're
Yeah.
closed, but the wood finish will be on the outside when it's open. Okay, I was doing that correctly, but hey, somebody out there might not know that. So
I've heard that some of the smaller ships, like a bark or even a sloop, sometimes they might not even have gun ports, which I feel great about just leaving them off because they're a fiddly extra step that I always try to prime them with holding them with my fingers with a hand primer and get my hand all black. So if I can skip that step on a small ship,
I will send you the link to my setup so you can get some alligator clips, Joseph. That makes priming them so much easier.
and I have those, but I hate them.
that is a good point, though. I don't think I can't remember. I think the first ship I ever built was the resin sloop, and I have the gun ports on that resin sloop. But then I had the same information dropped to me that most of the little 2-deck ships didn't even have gun ports. And I don't think I put another gun port on a 2-deck ship after that. I was like, forget this.
Interesting. I didn't know that, so all my ships have gun port.
I mean, it probably looks good still, but yeah. I'm just
how accurate that is, but I ran with it.
Yeah.
Only about half.
I probably got that information from you some way or another.
All right, so we've prepped the hull. How do we prime it?
I need to rewind a little bit because there are other accessories that I do put in my ships that also Firelock sells. I don't know if they sell well, but the lantern and the steering handle, because I know there's kind of a debate. A lot of people ask not for the steering handle. They say, well, I want how do you say, the steering wheel?
Ship's wheel.
Ship's wheel. Yeah.
A lot of people ask because that's kind of the iconic thing they know. And then So I think I have the steering handle on the Tartana and actually on the Barco Luengo. I don't know if it goes on the Barco Luengo, but I think it's on my Tartana.
I think on both of those two ships, I would guess that it would be on the deck, the tiller. I think that's what you call it.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have a under deck big enough for it to not be just on the top deck. I may be wrong. I don't really know ships all that well, but that's just me guessing.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment.
I'll glue that little thing on last if I'm going to put it on because I want to be able to get access to the deck. And sometimes I don't put it on just because it takes up another space for a model on the stern. And the stern on some ships are pretty small, like the sloop. You want your full space for your 14 guys back there.
Yeah, and then the light frigate has that little hole there that you're supposed to put another little thing in to hold the flag. So if you want to put your tiller on that back deck, it's a little bit more of a pain.
Yeah.
So you skip the tiller then most of the time.
I only put it on off ship if I want it to look especially fancy.
Yeah, for like a display piece, I would put it on. I put it on for my Corvette, and I put all that time into it. Then it got blowed up round 1. So I think the tiller's bad luck.
The plastic sloop has a tiller, and it actually doesn't really take up all that much, or if any, space on the back deck. So I always have it on that one.
Because it doesn't have a base.
Right, yeah, it's just sticking out of the back of the ship, basically.
Oh yeah, that's easier.
And what about the lantern?
I put that on last usually.
I don't have a single lantern on any of my ships. sad to say.
I usually put that on bigger ships, and I put it on last. I paint it alligator clip and then glue it on last.
If you're playing pirates this year for the Summer of Plunder, I have lots of ship accessory kits to give away. So join up the pirates if you want your ships to look spiffy.
But if you want to mathematically be more likely to get prizes, join the Native Americans because they only have 5 players and the pirates have 20. So,
and if you want to win the campaign, join the Spanish because we're going to win.
There's a third accessory that I want to ask. The anchor. Do you use it?
I don't.
I have them. I know that there's a way that you're supposed to be able to either, if you want to be really fancy, get some scale chain and run it up there. I don't, because that's one more thing to mess with measuring distances, or if you're trying to grapple someone and now you have the little anchor in the way. I've looked into it, but I've never used the anchor.
Interesting.
I painted a couple anchors. I'll throw one on a ship if I want to. You need what's it called, a cat's head going off the side to hang your anchor off of, and I've seen some people make those. But I don't glue an anchor onto the ship. I just have a couple painted I'll use if I feel like it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, the Corvette has them built in.
Oh yeah, they do have a cat's head.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to because I see this a lot when people build ships and they post pictures of them. You get the people like me that do it super practically and this is a game piece. I'm using this to play a game. And then you have people that I want to make this as much like a ship model as possible. And that's like the two extremes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
2 approaches.
And so and both are I like both of them because it's I like the practicality of my ships, and people do gorgeous ships. So, but I ain't got time for that.
All right, so we've prepped the hull, we've glued our accessories on. How do we all assess the priming situation? I'll let you start, Garrett.
Okay, so as people may know, I am a pretty cheap guy when it comes to painting and stuff. I don't have that many strictly strictly model paints. So what I do is I go out and get from the hardware store some Rust-Oleum, represent, because my company that I work for makes some chemicals that go into Rust-Oleum, and I just prime that sucker with good old just gray primer. Sometimes I found some red brown primer that I like that they make, that makes it a little bit easier on the hulls. So, but yeah, I just go with that stuff.
I am of the same build. I like the Rust-Oleum. I use a flat white Rust-Oleum in my minis, and I prime from 2 or 3 hand lengths away because I know it's thicker. But with the ships, I make sure that I coat it. I have a flat brown, I have a flat reddish brown that I use just as a baseline in the hull.
Yeah.
I spray paint prime as well. Sometimes if I'm really lazy, I'll tape off the grates on the deck first and prime that with black, because I hate painting black in between each little tiny square. It smashes a brush all to pieces and it takes forever. So if I'm smart, I'll spray that black first and then or maybe second. I guess I'll spray the whole thing with a color first, not white, because the hull is white. I have a hard time seeing if it's actually primed or not. So I'll usually use a brown, or I have used a couple different colors, but just a medium brown. I usually use Army Painter Primer. I like those. If you want to flush money down a toilet, you can use a GW primer. Those are pretty nice too. Sometimes they're too glossy, but and it'll take 2 sessions usually, because you kind of need to hold your model. Sometimes you can hold it underneath, but don't be afraid of painting part of it and then coming back 10 minutes later when it's paint is set and painting from the other angle, because you have to get your paint this way and that to get all the little cracks and crevices on the deck and underneath the bulkheads and stuff. That can be tricky. So doing it in 2 sessions usually has good results for me.
I have a stump that I then set my little tray that spins, and I set my ship on that, and I just spin it while I prime it. I'll have to send you that link, Joseph. It'll make your life minis, anything. You can put it on the thing and just move it with your finger, so you're not holding anything.
I like to turn it upside down and stuff to get all the angles. So no.
I just usually put a glove on, because I have access to rubber gloves a lot,
Yeah.
and just hold mine in different angles. If it's a smaller ship, you can do this a lot easier because you're not just holding like a 6th rate frigate that's like 5 pounds. And just try to
Yeah.
get all the angles. And like you said, Joseph, most of the time I will spray that. I'll do that process. I'll let it sit. I'll let it dry. And then I'll come back and look at it and see all the little spots I missed. And I'll just go back and like try to touch up the spots that I missed and then let that dry. And then it's ready to go.
Rather than overspraying it the first time.
Yeah. Try not to.
You can hand prime as well, and I've had really good success with that. If you want to dry brush paint your ship like Dexter does over on the Plunder Den, which he gets really good results, and I've been really happy with some of my ships have done this way too. Just hand paint, prime it with that black craft paint that you can really easily tell if you got everything, and you want a dark underlayer if you can use that. Dry brushing by successive lighter colors, that method that he likes to use, works really well. And it doesn't take very long. You just get a nice sturdy brush and smash that paint all over and all the cracks and everything, and you're ready to go. I know Dan likes to hand prime stuff, right?
I am not a barbarian.
We have technology.
Dexter, I love you. You're still a barbarian for priming by hand.
It's a different method for a different purpose, and it works real well for that way.
Unga bunga.
Hey,
I
he's
use my
not
airbrush.
breathing aerosols, so that's something, I guess.
That's true.
Real hobbyists breathe aerosol. It's good for you.
So I think
I-
Fernando, you're the only one left out here. What's your process?
So I usually use my airbrush. So I haven't primed with a spray can for a couple of years now since I got my airbrush. So I know that technically speaking, it's not as durable, but that's what I have. So that's what I use. I use Vallejo Mecha Primer, which is the same primer that I use for my minis.
Huh.
And usually, I mean, it's not as time effective as doing it with the spray can, but still it's I do smooth layers, and by the time especially if it's a big ship, by the time that I cover the whole ship, then the part that I started with is already dry, so I can do another pass and another layer. So within an hour, I think it's done for most of the ships. I mean, for a galleon, it may take a longer time, but for the smaller, I mean, for the Barco Luengo, it's quite easy. It's like in less than 10 minutes, it's already done.
You probably get like way smoother and more consistent layers doing it that way. So, you know.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I've heard. I mean, I don't know. You're the chemist, but I've heard that, technically speaking, is not as durable. Priming with airbrush is not as durable as doing it with a spray can. I don't know why.
Oh, unless something that they put in the paint for the airbrush makes it less durable. I don't know.
I don't know. I just know that the spray can primers are expensive compared to the ones for the airbrush, and I have the airbrush, so I use it.
All right, you've almost started painting.
Yeah, I can go and then do my experience painting because I think it may be quite different compared to you because I have an airbrush.
You're the only one of us that has an airbrush, so yeah, go for it.
Painting to me is very similar to priming. So I usually, I mean, if you have seen my ships in the Facebook, mine are not as nice as other people's ships. Mostly because I don't spend a lot of time doing it. Because while I can, honestly, I like to do it things fast. And for minis, it's okay because I don't know. I like to pay more attention to minis and it's still fast. But for ships, I kind of get bored faster, I
Yeah.
would say. So, and the other thing is that I really like the look of all ships. Like, technically speaking, I guess you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what ships would have looked like. Instead of fancy stuff, it's just wood. So I just kind of paint with some wooden colors. Recently, well, a couple of months ago, I bought these paints by AK Interactive called EXO, which are kind of large. They have a lot of paint, and they are designed to paint scenery. So, and for the amount of paint you get, they are cheap compared to the typical acrylic paints for minis. So those are the ones that I've been using, and they have two types of wood color, but they have also other kind of wood colors or other brown colors. So I try to make variations of the browns that I use in terms of the hull and the deck. But besides that, I just kind of paint that with an airbrush. And if you want to continue with the process I follow, and then we can speak about you. But then what I do is basically I wash. I do some wash. I do enamel wash by AK Interactive as well. That kind of gives them a grimy aspect. And then if I wanted to be fancy, I've tried a lot of things. Like I've seen some people do very nice looking colors, like they are graded in the main decks, and they look pretty nice. Pretty nice. But my issue is that given that I use wash in my style of painting, they all look grimy at the end. So I stopped doing kind of those kind of details, and I just do the enamel wash. And then I do dry brush with kind of I would say a color that looks like sand color more or less. And I dry brush, and it looks like an old ship. And if I want to look fancy, sometimes I do a deck that is, I mean, a part of the hull that is not wood color. For example, my fluid and my galleon have some parts that are red or green. But besides that, I think to me, the process is not as complicated as for some of you, because I've seen some of the ships that you do that they look quite nice, but that's not the style I follow. So, I mean, in part because of preference, in part because I'm just kind of lazy.
Yours look great, but everybody has their style and process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an airbrush, but I do something. My process as of late has been pretty similar. I use acrylic/craft paints. I did one ship with the speed paints, and while a lot of people say it looks good, I'm not convinced. I don't like the way it was a plastic sloop. I don't like the way that it looks, but I'm unwilling to strip it off and change it. So after I do the color priming, I usually just freehand. I'll do the trim. I'll try to do that a color. The deck I'll usually pick a color for. I usually end up mixing paints to give the deck a good contrast. And then I started to try to do the dry brush method, and I wasn't overly satisfied with it. But I also don't do a lot of ships, so I don't have the chops that some of these guys do that just make amazing looking ships. Mine are playable.
Yeah, do you what types of paint do you use? Do you use craft paints or do you use miniature paints?
I use a combination. Joseph sent me a whole bunch of Leho years ago that I've been using on my ships. And apart from that, my fiance has a ton of craft paint. So if I don't have a specific color for that, I will use craft paint if she's got a color that I need. I find that the acrylic paint tends to... I still do one or two coats on the trim, unless it's a black. I just put the black on really thick, but I don't like to do multiple coats. I also get bored if I'm doing the same color and the same thing multiple times. So I usually do a nice thick coat depending on the detail level. And then I'll just follow that up with a wash typically.
One question I have for both of you that have already went through your process. Your deck colors. Do you have a specific deck color that you always paint your decks, or do you vary that color up as well?
I vary them.
Okay.
What I started using, and it's the same color that I use for the bases of the Firelock minis, is I think a Vallejo sand color, which looks not as wood, but when you add the enamel wood wash that I have, it looks like wood.
Yeah. I have a similar process with decks. I have a specific color that I paint all my decks, and then I wash it. And then, like you said, I paint all of my mini bases for Blood and Plunder that same exact color and wash it. So I stay very consistent with my deck colors.
I also vary my deck colors. It depends on the color of the hull. If I do the reddish brown, I found out that for the deck, if I mix a flat red with a bright brown and can just kind of play with it, I like to make, if I'm doing a dark hull, I do a lighter deck. If I'm doing a lighter hull, I do a darker deck. I like it to contrast a little bit. And then same thing, I put it down and then I put a wash over it. As far as the minis, my 17th century guys, I'm still using the old Games Workshop Wildwood contrast. That's what I use. My 17th century guys all have that on the bases. 18th century models have, I think it's Sand Golem. for the deck color on the bases. That's how I kind of separate them out.
So
Okay.
now that you talk about the red color, the first ship that I painted was the resin slope, and I tried to be detailed with that one. It didn't work out as I wanted out, but I tried to be detailed and historically accurate. So I look into what kind of wood it existed within the Spanish Empire that will be kind of real, and I don't know, some mahogany look, which is kind of reddish. So I use that. So that's kind of the only ship that I have that is kind of reddish, but it doesn't look as mahogany. It looks like it was painted red, so it looks weird.
I did a little study on the deck color too. That's all. I've always struggled with that. How can I make the deck look right? And I still don't have a recipe after building more than 20 ships.
I mean, I don't know if mine look accurate or not, but to me, it looks decent. And I'm like, I want to stay consistent with it because I paint all my miniature bases the same way. So no matter what ship I do, I always paint the deck the same colors. Now I will vary up the hull parts quite a bit. Typically, I will do a darker color on the hull in contrast to the deck.
Same here. That deck, I understood they scrub it regularly if it's a merchant ship or a navy ship. I don't know if pirates clean up anything after themselves, and then it got
They don't.
salt bleached
They're
and sun
disgusting people.
bleached, so I think it usually was pretty light. But like that Stuttgart or whatever ship that is chugging around the ocean now, that Dan's, it's Russian made, isn't it, Dan?
The standard?
Yeah, it has a pretty dark deck. I keep seeing it on my Instagram, so that always makes me second guess myself. But I like a lighter deck in general.
Mhm.
I'm glad you get to see a little bit of me on your Instagram every now and again.
I haven't seen you on it yet,
But yeah, I've been on a couple of replica ships recently, and I have sort of the same experience. Like their decks are a little darker than I would expect them to be, but that's I don't know. The practices may have been different,
maybe they're taking care of it.
300 years ago.
So I have two approaches to painting my holes. Either I'll do it the Dexter method where I paint it, prime it black, and then use progressively lighter shades of brown and do a heavy dry brush over the whole thing, and then that gets you a nice, interesting and varied and rich texture by the time you're done. And then you go all the way up to pretty light, kind of like a sand color, almost a linen color, and then I'll wash over that. That's really easy. You don't really need any skill, just some patience to do 6, 8 layers of dry brushing. And you can use the $1 paints and just one big fat brush, and you're good to go. So it's cheap and easy. It just takes a few sessions sitting down with different colors. But since it doesn't really matter if your colors mix a little bit, you can kind of just do one color, then jump into the next one because they dry pretty fast, being a dry brush. Another way is just with hobby paints. I haven't used craft paints when I'm hand painting the holes, but I'll use Vallejo mostly and maybe a little GW. And I like to wet blend a little bit sometimes, where I use 2 different colors of brown on the exterior and I kind of blop 2 different colors on and kind of maybe a darker on the bottom, lighter on the top, and then kind of blend them together with the brush. And you get a little bit richer and not a monotone look, which looks interesting. That's kind of how wood wears and weathers. That can be an easy way to look like you know what you're doing if you're trying to make interesting looking wood. Then wash over that and then dry brush it. Then I do spot reapplication of washes if my dry brush is a little bright, or if I want more weathered areas, I'll use another coat. And I usually use the Agrax Earthshade from Games Workshop, but I also will mix in a little black, even a little red, if you want to change up your tone a little bit and get more of a interesting wood grain. The red, black, even green if you want something super grimy, just adding a little layer of green can make it look really spongy, and you can just put a little here and there. But yeah, base coat, dry brush or wash, dry brush, and some more wash. And then if you want to do the trim, different, I don't know what you call it, but there's those horizontal stripes on a bigger ship, even on a sloop. I usually do all the wood grain and then go back and just do trim after all that other stuff, because otherwise your dry brush is going to mess up your darker wood on the trim or something. And I've had good success with using a contrast black over the top of that. if you've done your dry brush and then you put the contrast black over it, you still get that rich look of the varied colors because you have that dry brush underneath and it shines through that thinner contrast paint. So that's a really good, easy way to make. You don't have to do another step of like highlighting edges or anything on your trim or your top of your bulkheads or anything.
I use the Agrax Earthshade as well on most of my hull pieces that are not like painted colors. Anything that's brown usually gets that. I I have just a basic method. I will typically paint the deck first, and all this is just with craft paint. I have probably 5 or 6 different dark browns that I use just to vary it up a little bit from ship to ship, and I'll just paint everything that I want to be that whole color, and then move on to I'll paint and I'll switch back and forth like as I'm waiting for the one section to dry that I want to be the dark brown. I might paint, this other section that I want to be the red, the painted section. I'll switch to that, and then I'll switch back and forth until everything's pretty much done. And then I'll put that wash over it. I'll dry brush sometimes if I'm not feeling lazy. I know in the past done ships where I'm just wanting to get them done and I won't actually do any kind of highlighting or dry brushing. I think they look presentable, but yeah, again, that's just me going with practicality again. Like I'm wanting these to be game pieces, not display pieces, so I spend quite a bit of time painting them, but I don't want to spend like a really long amount of time painting them to a really high standard.
Yeah, I'm curious. How
So
long do you think each of us spends painting a ship? Let's say a brigantine. It's pretty big, but not as big as a flute or a galleon or something. 3-deck ship. How long do you think you spend painting and rigging? How big of a commitment is the project if you do it kind of your medium grade, not the fanciest you do, but maybe not the sloppiest possible either?
You want like an hour
Hour.
estimate or like how many days it would take me of like little sessions of like my normal pace? Hours are harder to put on it because I never know exactly how long I spend because I have this method of like painting stuff to where I'll just like come downstairs for just 30 minutes to an hour, try to do it every day just to get something done, and so eventually things start getting done. I would guess for me on a 3-deck ship like that, and this is just painting we're talking about and rigging, like you said, maybe 6 hours?
Sounds reasonable.
Like a good weekend of doing project stuff? Maybe like 6 to 8? I don't know. It's hard to estimate.
but for me, I would say it will be a brigantine will be like 4 hours with the rigging. Without the rigging and the sails, I would say 3 hours. But my process is basically given that I have an airbrush, I prime it, I leave it, then I come back another day, I put the base coat and the color, then I wait, and the third day I do kind of the rest, the wash and the dry brush and the etchings and those kind of stuff. But in total, I would say 3 hours and 4 hours with the rigging and the sails with an airbrush.
For my brigantine, I challenged myself. I had the day off and I had primed the day before, so I said, I wonder if I can get this hull completely painted in a day. And I was able to. But now, like, my process really hasn't changed that much. For now, I think it would take me brushing probably 6 to 8 hours of brush work because I like to let things kind of dry in between. And then rigging and masts, I usually, once the hull is drying or something, I'll then go and prime the masts and then do final assembly. So I can do it in about a day. I know I did the bark long in less than 24 hours.
Yeah, I take a little longer than some of you probably because I'm slow. And sometimes I find myself using a small brush and it's stupid. I should use a bigger brush because I can work way faster. Sometimes I'll grab another brush and like, wow, look at it go. Um, for a brigantine, probably probably 4 hours of paint work and then another 2 hours if I wanted to rig it up nicely, or maybe another and make the sails. But if I wanted to rig it just what's on the pattern, probably 1 hour to rig it goes up fast when you get to bigger ships too. Like the surface area on a flute is like twice as much as on a brigantine, even though they're both 3-deck ships. But as you get bigger, the surface area multiplies.
Definitely.
I wanted to ask about the painting the details because I've seen. I mean, the smaller ships have no details, but like the galleon has these adornments. I don't know how do you say in English, like the in Spanish is garigoleado. Well, these things that some people kind of paint gold, and I've seen some historical debates about would these ships use kind of gold etchings or would they not? I paint mine mostly like yellow, but it's just not gold. And when I use kind of metals, I use bronze. But I've seen some debates about that as well.
Yeah, some people have very strong opinions about using yellow or gold, and it's hard to know, but it is provable they use some sort of gilding, and a lot of paintings have gold. So the 16th, 17th century, or 17th, 18th century paint, they have gold on the stern, especially the bigger ships. Smaller ships, less likely, and sometimes they use yellow too. So I try to use a mix.
I use a mix as well, especially on the bigger ships. Like I'm gonna have a little bit of gold gilding on my galleon, but I'm not putting any gilding on my 2-deck sloop. So I just kind of draw the line there of like, would I think somebody actually do some gilding on this ship? Maybe, yeah, I'll put a little bit on there, you know.
What about you, Dan?
I completely ignore all of that. I just do what I think is aesthetically pleasing. So on the smaller ships, I don't do a lot of details. On the light, I've done 2 light frigates. Well, I have 2. I've done one. My brother did one for me because he's still a better painter than I am. On the bigger ships, they got some filigree, some detail looking stuff. I'll make it look pretty. I completely ignore any kind of historical accuracy, depending on what kind of mood I'm in when I start painting.
Understandable.
I don't like to be constrained.
I'll hold back my remarks about barbarians and that other.
So, but by the way, I have a tip for those that want to kind of have more adornments to their ships, because with the exception, I would say of the galleon and the 6th rate, none of them have figureheads, and a lot of people want figureheads in their ships, right? So what I've done is that if you go to Etsy and you look to kind of fake jewelry, you would see a lot of cool adornments that you can stick in the bow stern of your ship, and they look good as figureheads.
Huh.
And you prime it, and they look nice.
Yeah, I'm sure you could probably find some good mermaids and dolphins from those.
I actually got from, I think it was from WizKids, a baby Kraken like D&D figure, and I put that on for the figurehead of my 6th rate. My brother was kind enough to use a hobby knife and get the lion off, and we stuck a baby Kraken on there.
That sounds cool.
But yeah, or if you do want to go historical with it, I know I use a lot of times the oak and iron guides for painting ships for a lot of my colors, my color schemes and things. And I know we have on the website a lot of galleries of ships, and a lot of those are historically painted, I believe, like as close as we know anyway.
Well, galleries are a lot of are a lot of pictures from the painting contests we've done, so they represent work from across the community. So at the front page of bloodandpigment.com, there's a gallery tab that has galleries for ships and commanders and units and stuff. So if you just want to look at a concentration of the work from people out in the community, some historical, some is fantastical, some is brown, some is fancy, just a wide variety, really good for inspiration. Just pull up those galleries and you can sort the gallery by different ship holes. So you can, if you're looking at a brigantine, just click brigantine and I'll show you 10, 20 different brigantines painted by different people, and it can be good inspiration.
I guess when I said that, I was thinking it was mostly your ships. I didn't consider it was community-wide gallery, but yeah.
So if you entered a ship in our contest, it's going to be there probably.
Yeah, true. I did not get mine done. I wanted to get the galleon done for the contest, but I did not get it done. Other things held me up, and I've just been behind on it.
Galleon is a huge project. I got like 10, 12 hours into it, and then I just put it on the top shelf and just let it sit for a while I did other stuff, and I came back to like 6 months later, but I shouldn't have done that. But it is a big project and it needs some patience.
Well, and I decided to do some
Wanna rush it.
fancy painting on the side of mine. So like I've got some line work and stuff on the side of it to make it. Kind of took inspiration from some of the older galleons that you see paintings of. Some from like the late 16th century. That's got some of that artwork on the sides. So yeah, like I don't know if that's coming across what it is, but
Yeah.
I'll send you some pictures of it. One other thing that I wanted to hit on was what color do you guys paint the insides of the gun walls?
That's a good question.
Just another wood color.
Just another wood color. I do mine, and this comes from the Oak and Iron painting guides. I always do mine like a dark brownish red.
I do mine that same color a lot too. I like the Vallejo Cavalry Brown. It's a dark, rich red, and you can kind of highlight it with a brighter red, and it comes out real good. But on a smaller ship, I'll just do it a darker brown than the deck. But on a bigger ship, I'll do it that redder color, and it seems to work. It seems like a lot of the gun ports are always pictured red or a reddish brown. I assume that's the same color as the gun walls inside.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I always paint my gun port covers the same color that I paint the inside of the hull. So yeah, that was another thing that I know we hadn't thought of yet that is should be considered when painting a ship. So
For me, it basically depends on the color scheme I'm going for. I don't have a set color. It depends on the palette. Oh, we also got to mention to varnish the bejesus out of it.
oh yes, varnish. Because if you're like us and you take these things out and use them and play with them, they're going to get rubbed and scratched and knocked over and everything else you can think of. I know this gets into rigging more, but I have re-glued the little flagstaff on my bowsprit for my 6th rate. I know like 5 times already. Like I always get that thing knocked off when I take it somewhere.
That's a tradition for me and Guy whenever we play together. He has to break it at some point, otherwise it doesn't feel like a full game session.
Just I'm imagining him just walking out of your house now and being like, "Oh wait," and then walking over to your 6th rate
go
and
back.
just snapping it, and then like, "All right, see you, Joseph." But I think we'll save the masts and the rigging and the sails for another time. I want to get into announcements. So I know, Joseph, you had put on our schedule a Historic on Land tournament. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, I poked around to see what's going on with Historicon. It's in late July. I don't have the dates right in front of me, but it's always a good convention, and it always has some Firelock events there. Unfortunately, they put Historicon so close to Gen Con that Firelock isn't able to attend because it's too much to go to one weekend and then get all packed up and drive across the country the other way there next weekend. So Firelock won't be there, but there is at least one event there. There's going to be a land tournament run by a gentleman by the name of Joe Richards, I believe. Have a couple more details on.
That is correct.
We have on our menu on Blood and Pigment, we have a events page now. You can kind of hopefully keep that updated, and you can see some appropriate details and hopefully a contact person for events. So I don't know the force number. I think it's 150 point land tournament at Historic on Friday, 1 to 6 p.m. if I remember correctly. I know Tyler will be there as well.
Yeah. Fernando, did you say you were going to be there or not this time?
I still don't know. So as you may be aware, I'm not American, so I need to get my visa. And it depends on my visa process.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah.
Okay. Gen Con is going to be around that same time. I think it's the weekend after that. I'm going to be there with Miguel Vega. We're going to be running a treasure ship scenario. So bring your pirates out. I'm going to be a big Spanish guy on a big galleon. You can try to take my treasure. That's going to be on the Thursday, and it's going to start at 6 p.m. I believe they just released the schedules last weekend for Gen Con, so registration, by the time this gets edited and put up, will probably already have started because registration starts this coming Sunday. And so that's going to fill up pretty quickly. But don't fret if you don't get into that. We're going to have pickup games at 10 and 2 every day. So somebody will be around to do demos and pickup games in an area for that. And I'm planning on being available for a couple of those, but Gen Con's kind of my own con that I like to do stuff for myself, so I'm not going to be 100% Firelock games while I'm there, but I'm hoping I can get over and play some Blood and Plunder for a couple times with that.
You have another secret life? Do you do things besides play Blood and Plunder?
I play a lot of board games.
Me too.
My wife and I play a lot of board games, and that's she goes with me up there, and we have a really good time up there. It's a fun con. And then of course Summer of Plunder is coming up June 2nd. When is the ending date on that? I know it runs for 9 weeks, but what's the
August 2nd.
August 2nd? Okay, so yeah,
Might be 3rd, but yeah, right.
yeah, I had said that I think the last little bit of the Summer of Plunder is overlapping with Gen Con, so it was last year.
Yeah, it should be that weekend, I think. You're right. Blow everybody out of the water for the last week with their galleon. That'll be nice.
Yeah, I'm debating on whether I want to lug mine up to Gen Con because it is a pain to carry that thing around in such a big con because everything is so spread out because there's just so much of it. So
Yeah, I had a case you can strap it to, then like wheel it around.
I do have that. But Mike also has a galleon that we used last year, and so I might just commandeer his again.
Just carve out the bottom of it
We'll
and wear it
see.
as a hat. Then you don't have to carry it.
The things people have been doing with galleons lately, I don't think I would be surprised if somebody did that. But that would be one expensive hat. For more Blood and Plunder content, you can go to bloodandpigment.com and check out all the material we have over there. We have ships, articles on ships, nations, factions, terrain, painting guides, battle reports, everything under the sun. Go check it out.
Check our YouTube channel as well. We're trying to get some more stuff up there. I got a video up today just on our Adepticon experience there. And I have a series of rule explanation videos planned, and that's Learn to See video plan as well. So that should be going up the next little bit, or not a little bit here, but in the near future. And you can check out our Patreon as well if you want to throw us some money to keep things moving over here. Appreciate that help.
As always, keep your dice ready and the win at your back, Yarharr.